Revealed, how one mocked CEO's son transformed into a life-changing hero, toppling a 900M empire. Jake Hartman stood on the balcony of his father's gilded mansion, resplendent yet cold against the backdrop of Chicago's skyline. The air was sharp, tinged with the scent of industry and desperation. Below, the pulse of the city beat loudly, a chorus of honking horns and shuffling feet. In stark contrast, his life had been a never-ending cycle of lavish parties and empty laughter. As the son of Richard Hartman, a powerful CEO, Jake was living a life everyone envied, yet he felt suffocated by an inherited burden he never sought. Every day, as he walked through the vibrant streets, his heart ached for the families struggling to make ends meet. He saw the same worn faces, mothers juggling kids and groceries, fathers with their backs bent from hard labor. The local factory, a beacon of hope for many, was under threat of closure. The news hit him like a tidal wave. It reignited a flicker of defiance deep within his chest, the kind that had long been drowned out by his father's expectations. He knew what it was like to feel powerless. In countless conversations with his father, Jake had heard the dismissive laughter aimed at the worker class. Richard spoke of them as if they were mere cogs in a machine, disposable and forgettable. But to Jake, they were the heartbeat of Chicago, the people his heart now ached to help. As he wandered the streets, he felt their mounting frustration surround him. He engaged with every group he met, a veteran with gaze hollow from service, a single mother whose smile hid concern, and a man in a wheelchair fighting rejection from jobs due to his disability. They were an unlikely coalition, but they all sought the same thing, a fair chance. Jake's heart raced, a fire surged within him as he began to organize actions aimed at saving the factory. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jake poured his energy into every meeting, his passion igniting hope among the worried faces of his new friends. With each rallying cry, they grew stronger, less like shadows in the city and more like a proud army determined to reclaim their worth. But just as success edged into view, a darker force loomed, Richard Hartman. Fuming at the idea of his son's rebellion, Richard initiated a campaign to eradicate what he deemed an embarrassing nuisance. He threatened to pull funding from community programs, to erase the voices of the very people they once looked down upon. Jake felt the weight of his father's empire demanding submission. As tensions escalated, Jake stood before the eager crowd but found it hard to swallow. Could he face the looming chasm between loyalty to blood and devotion to the people? He felt their eyes on him, a blend of unwavering belief and desperation. The fate of the factory and perhaps the future of his own soul hung in the balance. With that realization, Jake's internal battle intensified. In the heart of Chicago, amidst a movement born of despair and hope, Jake found a newfound sense of self rising within him. Would he turn away from what he had known, or stand tall and risk everything to fight for those who mattered? The answer was still a breath away, electric in the air, as the moment of truth approached. Jake's heart pounded in his chest like a drum. The crowd was alive with anticipation, a living entity of hope and despair. Each face held a story, each voice a dream that hadn't yet faded. As he stepped forward, the weight of his father's legacy felt heavier than ever, challenging him to choose a side. Together, we can make a change, he shouted, trying to infuse his voice with confidence. This factory isn't just a building, it's the backbone of our community. We can't let them take it away. Cheers erupted, a wave of support that momentarily drowned out his fears, but doubts tugged at the corners of his mind. What would his father do if he unleashed this firestorm? Richard Hartman was a man used to getting his way, and Jake knew he wouldn't take kindly to disobedience. The thought sent a shiver down his spine while the crowd's energy surged around him. As he looked out over the gathered masses, Jake saw the faces of his friends. Linda, the single mother whose laughter had initially drawn him in, Marcus, the veteran whose stories had touched his heart, and Alan, the man in a wheelchair who never backed down in the face of rejection. They believed in him, and that belief felt like a lifeline in the turbulent sea of his thoughts that it was time to take a stand. He raised his fists and addressed the crowd again. We deserve a fair fight, a chance to keep our dreams alive. Together, we're not just fighting for jobs, we're fighting for our dignity. The roar that met his words was electrifying. He could feel their energy surging through him, shaking off any last remnants of hesitance. But as the cheers subsided, the reality of potential backlash washed over him. What would happen when Richard retaliated? That thought haunted him like a ghost, threatening to cast shadows over the momentum he'd built. Later that evening, he found himself sitting in his car, parked just a few blocks from the factory. Rain drizzled down the windshield, creating a blur of city lights, a perfect reflection of his tumultuous thoughts. There, amidst the chaos, he made a decision. He couldn't turn back now, too many people were counting on him. With renewed determination, Jake pulled out his phone and dialed. "Hi, Linda. We need to escalate this. Let us reach out to the news stations and get them involved. People need to see how important this is." "Are you sure, Jake?" she replied, concern threading her voice. "This could end badly for you. Your father won't back down easily." "I get that, but I can't stand by any longer. If I don't fight for them, who will?" He felt a spark of anger, a fire that now roared in his chest rather than simmered. As they discussed strategy, Jake absorbed her words, the plan unfolding like a map in his mind. Each step he took drew him further from his father's shadow and deeper into a world he never imagined he'd navigate. The next day, armed with a sense of purpose, Jake arrived at the factory just as dawn broke, illuminating his path ahead. He was no longer a lost son but a man ready to take charge. Workers gathered, their faces etched with hope and fear, but together they could confront anything. Suddenly, a black SUV pulled up, and Jake's breath hitched. The tinted windows rolled down, revealing a familiar silhouette. Richard Hartman stepped out, a storm brewing in his eyes. Jake's heart raced, an unshakable mix of fear and resolve pulsing through him. What would happen when his father faced the truth of his rebellion? Would this confrontation shatter everything he had built? As Richard stepped from the SUV, a crowd of workers parted like waves, their murmurs a mix of shock and anticipation. Jake stood rooted in place, heart pounding in his ears, as his father's eyes locked onto his. The air thickened with tension, each heartbeat echoing like thunder. "Jake," Richard called, his voice steady, yet laced with an edge that made Jake's insides twist. "I expected to find you here." The casual disdain dripped from his words, a reminder of the man who had always dominated the room. "I'm not going anywhere," Jake retorted, meeting his father's glare head-on. The workers watched, a collective breath held in suspense. This was his moment, a leap into uncharted territory, where fear lost its grip for just an instant. "Really?" Richard leaned in closer, his tone dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You think you can justify me? You think you can rally a pathetic crowd against your own blood?" His words burned like acid, yet Jake felt the heat of resolve rising in his chest. "They're not pathetic," Jake shot back, his voice rising above the din. "These people deserve their jobs, their futures. They've built this community, not you." Each word felt like a brick, solid and true, stacking the foundations of his rebellion. Richard's lips twisted into a sardonic smile. "And do you really think the media will help? They'll chew you up and spit you out, son. You're just like the rest of them, nothing more than a pawn." Jake hesitated. Would he really risk everything? There was no turning back now. The faces behind him, Linda, Marcus, and Alan, looked on, their hopes resting on his decision. He drew a deep breath and found the strength to reveal what he had held back for too long. "I'm not a pawn. I'm ready to be a king, and it's time I forge my own path." The crowd erupted in whispers, a rising wave of excitement unfurling around him. Richard's expression shifted, confusion mingling with anger. "You think you know better than me? I built this empire on the backs of people who deserve better. Jake countered, feeling the warmth of the crowd's support wash over him, igniting a fire deep within. You may have built an empire, but it's crumbling. People see through your lies now. The tension hovered in the air like a tightrope. Jake felt the weight of his words hanging there, challenging the very foundation of their relationship. Had he really just brought this battle to the surface? Suddenly, a voice broke through the murmurings of the crowd. We support you, Jake. It was Marcus, his voice booming with conviction. The words traveled like electricity, igniting a spark among the workers standing behind him. You're fighting for us, and we're ready to fight too. Linda shouted, her eyes bright with determination. With that, a wave of support swept through the crowd. Cheers erupted, their solidarity echoing off the factory walls. In that moment, Jake felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. He was no longer just Jake Hartman, son of Richard. He was Jake, the leader of change. Richard's presence felt diminished, his authority crumbling like dust in the wind. This isn't over, he hissed, but the threat fell flat. Jake could see it now. His father was just another man, flawed and vulnerable. As the excitement soared, Jake caught a glimpse of hope radiating from every face in the crowd. In that moment, they were united, a collective force ready to confront the challenges ahead. But as Richard retreated to his SUV, a chilling thought crossed Jake's mind. What would his father do next? Would this confrontation lead to a retaliation that could jeopardize everyone's dreams? The question loomed, like a storm cloud waiting to break. Jake's heart beat faster. He had ignited a fire, but could he keep it burning against the winds of retaliation? The tension in the air felt electric. Jake stood taller, fueled by the cheers of the crowd. He could hardly believe this was happening. Richard's retreat was a victory, but Jake knew it was just the first battle in a war that wouldn't easily be won. Jake! What's the next move? Linda called, her voice cutting through the swirling excitement. The crowd turned toward him, eyes filled with hope, and suddenly he felt the full weight of their expectations. His mind raced. We need to organize, gather our strength. We can't just stand here and wait for my father to retaliate. We need to take charge of our narrative. Alan stepped closer, his brows furrowed with concern. But what about the factory? They could shut us down, or worse. We can't afford to lose our jobs. Jake felt a tightness in his chest. He understood Alan's fear. I get it, but standing up for ourselves is the only way we'll keep our jobs in the long run. If we don't fight now, he'll keep taking advantage of us. Marcus nodded, a sense of determination springing to life in his posture. Let us make a plan. A rally, a meeting, something big enough that the community sees we're not going to back down. The crowd buzzed with energy as they offered suggestions, flyers, social media outreach, even a petition. Jake grinned at the fervor in their voices. They were turning fear into action, and he had ignited their passion, but even as they discussed strategies, a gnawing worry tugged at him. Richard wouldn't take this lightly. Would he retaliate with force or try to silence Jake's rebellion? Jake could see the darker shades of his father's nature lurking just out of sight, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Guys, we need to be careful, Jake finally said, the gravity of his tone silencing the crowd. Richard is ruthless. If he sees us as a threat, he could try to play dirty. What do you mean? Linda asked, concern etching her features. I mean, he might try to undermine our unity. He'll find ways to divide us. Fear tactics, manipulation. We have to keep our trust strong, be open about everything. This is about more than just us. We're fighting for every worker here. As the workers nodded, Jake could see the fire in their eyes dim a notch at the thought of their leader's potential strategies. He had to keep hope alive, even while casting light on the dangers ahead. Let us regroup tonight, Jake said, confidence creeping back into his voice. We'll make a concrete plan. We keep fighting, we must prepare for whatever he throws at us. Together. With unity rekindled, the crowd erupted in renewed cheers, and Jake felt the warmth of their collective spirit wrap around him. But there was still that nagging fear, the battle inside his chest echoed the unease growing around him. What if Richard was already moving behind the scenes? What if by the time they prepared, it was too late? They dispersed with a sense of community, but Jake lingered behind, heart heavy with uncertainty. As he watched his father's SUV pull out of the lot, a cold shiver ran down his spine. What was Richard planning? Would he strike from a shadow, or come crashing through the front lines? Jake took a deep breath. Change was coming, and with it, danger. The question loomed, could courage outmaneuver fear, or would the empire Richard built come crashing back down on them? The sun sank low on the horizon, casting an orange glow over the factory grounds as Jake made his way home. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the weight of the world was pressing down on his shoulders. He wanted to bask in the moment of triumph, to celebrate the rallying cry that had ignited hope. But Richard loomed large in his mind, a shadow that refused to dissipate. As he entered his home, the familiar creak of the door reminded him of countless evenings spent lost in thought. It was a stark contrast now, everything felt different. This wasn't just about him anymore. He could hear his mother humming softly in the kitchen, and the aroma of fried chicken filled the room. For a brief moment, the joy of home washed over him, but it was quickly dashed by the reality waiting just outside. Jake's mom looked up, her smile warm yet questioning. "How did it go today, sweetheart?" His stomach tightened. "It was good, I think. We made some progress," he answered, but his tone betrayed the turmoil roiling inside. She knew him too well to be fooled. "Just good. Yeah, just feels like we're standing on a cliff, and the wind is picking up." She nodded, understanding him without a word. Life had taught her to be resilient, and she dared to hope for a better future, even when it felt out of reach. "Jake, listen," she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Whatever happens, remember why you're doing this. You're not just fighting for yourself, but for everyone who walks through those factory gates. You're stronger than him." A surge of confidence filled his heart briefly, but the gnawing doubt crept back. How could he be the strength they needed against a man like Richard? Later that night, as Jake dialed the number for Marcus, his hands trembled slightly. The din of voices on the other end flooded through the speaker as he tried to steady himself. He could hear the excitement buzzing over the arrangements they were making for the upcoming rally. He sensed that same fire in their hearts, the unity they desperately needed. "Jake, got your notes ready?" Marcus asked, full of energy. Yeah, I do. We're meeting at the park, right?" "Absolutely. We'll get everyone organized. Make sure to bring the flyers." Jake nodded, picturing the community coming together. It could be just the spark they needed to keep moving forward. Yet as they settled on details, an uneasy thought clawed at the back of his mind. What if Richard tries to intervene? Jake said, unable to shake the feeling. "Let him. We'll be ready. We have to keep pushing. This is our moment." The passion in Marcus's voice energized him, and Jake found himself smiling for the first time that evening. The next morning, he slipped out of bed early, determination painted across his face. With the sun rising, he made his way to the factory. Workers greeted him with nods and murmurs of encouragement. They were ready to stand together. But as he stepped inside, he noticed the tension simmering beneath the surface. Conversations halted, and eyes flicked to the corner where Richard's office loomed menacingly. A cold shiver returned, and the familiar knot formed in his stomach. Discussion of the rally filled the air, but whispers of anxiety took root. As the vibration of the nation's unrest seeped into their small town, Jake realized Richard wouldn't just sit back. Before Jake could address the crowd, a reporter burst through the doors, her camera crew in tow. "Jake, can you comment on the allegations against your father?" she called out, shoving the microphone toward him. The room went silent, an electric charge crackling in the air. Jake felt the weight of the moment hang heavy on him. He opened his mouth, but suddenly, the stakes felt too high, and the reality of his situation crashed over him like a wave. What had Richard done? What was really at stake? In that moment of uncertainty, the sound of his heart pounding in his chest echoed loudly, drowning the world around him. Was he ready for this? Would he have the strength to face not just Richard, but the truth waiting to be revealed? The eyes of his comrades were on him, waiting for his words, their hopes resting on his shoulders. What was he going to say? In that suspended silence, Jake realized he was no longer just a son, and it was time to step up. But could he find the right words? Jake stood frozen, the weight of the moment pressing down like a heavy fog. He could feel the eyes of the crowd fixated on him, their unspoken questions hanging in the air. To the left, a knot of workers exchanged anxious glances, while to the right, his mother's worried face loomed. He felt a mix of fear and a flicker of something else, perhaps a spark of courage. Clearing his throat, Jake began, "I don't have all the details yet." But his voice trembled, and he paused to gather his thoughts. "But I know my father, and I believe he wouldn't stand for anything wrong. This is a matter of trust. We need to hold on to hope, not just for the future, but for each other." Murmurs broke out in the crowd, some nodding in agreement, others looking uncertain. Richard's name was still fresh, filling the room with dread, and they needed more from him. He could feel their anticipation, expectant eyes willing him to say the words that would give them strength. "Look," Jake continued, his tone rising with passion. "We've faced hurdles before and come through stronger on the other side. What we're doing now has nothing to do with my family or past mistakes, it's about our right to stand together and voice what we need. We deserve better." A cheer erupted from one side of the factory, and the sound rolled through the room like a wave. Faces lit up, and Jake felt a rush of energy flow through him. But before he could bask in that moment, a sharp voice cut through the applause. "What do you really know, Jake? You're just the CO's son. You think you're going to save us?" It was Brad, a longtime worker who always had a skeptical edge. Jake's heart sank. He knew better than to let fear win, though. "You're right," he said, meeting Brad's gaze head-on. "I haven't been in your shoes. But I'm here fighting with you. If Richard pushes against us, it falls on all of us, every one of you. It's a fight for justice, for our community. We have a chance at change, and I want to stand by." He could see Brad's eyes soften, and he breathed in relief. Maybe, just maybe, they were starting to connect. At that moment, the factory doors swung open. Silence fell as Richard himself strode in, an imposing figure cloaked in authority, a storm ready to break. Every tense muscle in Jake's body tightened. What was he doing here? Richard's gaze swept over the crowd, then landed on Jake, his icy stare exposing nothing. "I'm here to set the record straight," he announced, his voice booming. "You think this community can fight against me? You're sorely mistaken." A heavy tension hung in the air, and fear surged back into the workers' hearts. Jake stepped forward instinctively, shielding his friends with his presence. "No, sir. We will not be silenced or intimidated. This factory, this community is ours. We will decide our future." As the words left his mouth, Jake felt the pulse of solidarity behind him, a reminder of all they had built together. The rally was no longer just a plan, it was a declaration. The room was electric. Somewhere deep inside, Jake realized he was no longer just fighting to back his father. The fight was for every person who felt powerless under Richard's reign. Richard smirked, but Jake could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, a chink in his armor. "You think you can rally them against me? You'll regret this." Jake inhaled deeply, ready. "No more regrets. We're willing to risk everything." Richard's expression darkened, and for a moment, Jake caught a glimpse of the man who had caused so much suffering. It fueled his resolve. He would not back down now, but as Richard turned on his heel, Jake knew this was just the beginning. The battle lines had been drawn, and soon everything would change. What was Richard planning next? And would the community rally behind Jake before it was too late? The tension weighed heavily, hanging like a loaded gun in the air. This wasn't just a fight for a factory, it was about truth, courage, and the spirit of resilience. Would they stand together? Jake took a breath, trying to steady himself as he watched Richard strut back down the aisle, a predator retreating to regroup. The anger simmered in the room, but Jake could feel the surge of determination building. He turned to face the crowd, his heart pounding. Each worker's face reflected a mix of fear and hope, and in that moment, he realized he wasn't just the CEO's son anymore. He was one of them. Listen! He shouted, raising his hands. The din quieted, and he felt the weight of their expectations again. Today is not just about Richard and his threats. It's about us. All of us. Someone in the back shouted, "We need a plan." Yes. A plan. Jake echoed, his mind racing. He glanced at his mother's anxious face, gathering strength from her presence. He knew they didn't need just words. They needed action. Let us talk about what we can do together. Let us brainstorm ideas. We need to organize our voices. Take back our rights. A ripple of agreement washed through the crowd. Some started chanting, "We stand together." Jake's pulse spiked. He felt the energy morph into something powerful. He climbed onto the nearest platform, gripping the edge as he looked out over the sea of eager faces. We won't let Richard intimidate us. It's time for our voices to be heard. How many of you are willing to stand strong? Hands shot up, expressions fierce and resolute. The unity fueled Jake, igniting a fire within him. Great! We'll gather in groups, strategize, share ideas. I'll step out and talk to the media. If Richard wants a fight, we'll give him one, together. His voice crescendoed through the factory, echoing off the cold walls and reigniting their hopes. The cheers grew louder, a rising tide of determination. But just as Jake felt himself riding the wave, doubt crept back in. What if Richard came back swinging? He cast a quick glance at the factory doors, the uncertainty looming like shadows at dusk. He needed to keep the momentum going. Let us meet again tomorrow. We'll hold a rally outside the factory. We'll invite everyone. If we're going to make noise, we need everyone to hear it. The crowd erupted in applause, and for a moment, hope replaced their fear. But then, out of the corner of his eye, Jake saw Richard standing at the edge of the doorway, arms crossed. His expression was dark, but Jake could sense anger brewing beneath the surface, a storm ready to descend. "Jake!" Richard called, voice dripping with contempt. "You think your little gatherings will stop what's coming? You're treading on dangerous ground." Jake swallowed hard but held his ground. "No, you're the one who needs to watch your step, Richard. This isn't just about you. We're not falling for your intimidation tactics anymore." Richard smirked, but it was colder now, more threatening. "You'll regret this, Jake. You may think you can lead these people, but I assure you, I will crush this uprising before it even begins." The factory felt thick with tension as Richard turned to leave, and Jake's heart raced. Questions rushed through his mind. What did Richard have planned? And how could he protect his co-workers? With the workers rallying behind him, could he truly help them stand up against Richard's empire? Or was he unleashing a storm that would tear them apart? In that moment, Jake realized this fight transcended mere labor disputes. It was about forging a new path, not just for their jobs, but for their dignity. Would they dare to break the chains that had confined them for so long? Time ticked away, and change was coming fast. Would Jake have what it takes to lead them? The countdown to tomorrow's meeting loomed ahead, and with it, the potential for either victory or devastation. The next day dawned gray and dreary, the kind of day that mirrored the uncertainty hanging over the factory. Jake woke up, the weight of yesterday's events sitting heavily in his chest. He glanced at the clock, it was time to rise. He rubbed his eyes, still lingering in the remnants of his dreams, where he imagined all the workers united, laughing and celebrating their new beginning, but reality was waiting. The factory buzzed with activity as he made his way to the meeting room. Long tables were set up, workers gathering with worried expressions. Jake stepped inside, feeling their eyes on him, their hopes and fears intertwining. He took a deep breath, reminding himself of the electrifying moment he had shared with them before. "Okay, everyone," he said, his voice shaking slightly but firm. "This is our chance. Today we discuss our rally, but we need to be smart. Richard is not going to sit back and watch this unfold." A stout woman with silver-streaked hair raised her hand. "What if he tries to stop us, Jake? What if he sends security to break us up?" Jake could see the fear in her eyes and it pooled in his stomach like a stone. "Then we stand our ground. We have to show him that we won't back down." "Easy for you to say," someone else chimed in, "you're the CEO's son." He felt a lump in his throat. "I'm not just that anymore. I want to prove that I'm with you, that we are in this together. Let me show you how Richard operates. We can use that against him." Whispers spread across the room, the tension hung thick. They began to brainstorm strategies. Ideas bounced around the power of social media, bringing in local leaders to support their cause, handing out flyers. But each suggestion brought with it a ripple of fear. "How do we know we'll be safe?" echoed from the corner. Jake's mother spoke up, her voice steady but gentle. "How do we know Richard won't retaliate? Because we'll be together." Jake shouted, eyes blazing. "We're a community. And communities protect each other. If he wants to attack one of us, he has to attack all of us." Nods rippled through the group. Slowly, spirits began to lift. As they finalized plans, a sudden commotion outside caught Jake's attention. He peered out the window to see a group of workers marching toward the factory gates, holding signs proclaiming their support. The sight fueled a spark of excitement in his chest that almost took his breath away. They were uniting, and this was just the beginning. The rest of the workers joined him by the window, awe on their faces. Together, they felt the pulse of something bigger than themselves. They were part of a wave of change surging forward, but deep down, Jake's heart raced. Would Richard take this as a declaration of war? What level of intimidation would he resort to? A nervous energy crackled in the air, and he caught his mother's gaze. She looked equally torn between pride and fear. As they stepped outside to join the rally, their cheers mingling with those of the supporters outside, a chilling thought crossed Jake's mind. When the backlash came, how hard would it hit? What would he lose if they stood up to Richard? He squeezed his fists, determination washing over doubt, but the looming question haunted him. Would they be strong enough to face the storm, or would the tidal wave of Richard's wrath wash them all away? As he walked into the crowd, he felt a mix of hope and dread. Tomorrow might be the day they truly made their stand, or the beginning of their downfall. The crowd swelled with energy, voices raised high, chanting for change as fists pumped in the air. Jake soaked it in, feeling the surge of adrenaline push aside some of his anxiety. He stood at the front, engulfed in the sea of faces, each person filled with purpose, a purpose he had kindled. The rally was supposed to be peaceful, a show of strength and unity. Yet a shadow loomed over Jake's mind. Richard was watching. The CEO was exceedingly calculative, and Jake's gut twisted at the thought of what retaliation could look like. The workers' chants felt almost like a double-edged sword. While empowering, they could also summon retribution. He took a deep breath, focusing on the sign's bold words written fiercely. "Justice for workers. Together we rise." He turned to a group of high school kids from the community who had come to support their parents. They were excited and a little nervous, like fireflies flickering in the dusk. Their presence filled him with both hope and guilt. The children believed in something well beyond his understanding. "Let us keep it peaceful," he shouted above the noise, hoping to project calm as much as strength. The crowd roared back in affirmation. But just as the feelings of hope began to settle, a shadow flickered near the entrance of the factory. Security guards, dressed in dark suits, loomed like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Jake felt his heart drop. He hadn't expected Richard to escalate so quickly. "Don't let them intimidate us," he called out, his voice strained with urgency. People turned to him, and he saw the resolve in their faces shift from excitement to worry. A commanding figure stepped forward, Richard himself, his presence shaking the air with tight tension. "You think a cheap rally will change anything?" he boomed. "I built this company from the ground up, and I'll see to it that you get knocked back down." The crowd fell silent, the chilly wind rustling through the banners they had prepared. It was as if time hung suspended, a breath caught in their throats. Jake's eyes darted around, catching glimpses of the worried faces and the fading confidence in the air. "Richard!" Jake shouted back, forcing himself to step forward, breaking the silence. He couldn't let fear dictate the day. "This isn't just a rally. This is our stand for respect and our rights." "That sounds nice, boy," Richard sneered, "but I hold the power here. Let us see how long this little act lasts when people start losing their jobs." A thunder of murmurs cascaded through the crowd. Jake's heart swelled with frustration and anger. His fists clenched at his sides, each word Richard spat igniting a fire within him. Somehow, the stakes had soared to a new height, and Jake felt trapped between the urgency to rally his workers and the dark reality within Richard's threats, yet, beneath the simmering resentment and the threat of fallout lingered something stronger, a fierce loyalty to those standing alongside him. "We're not just numbers. We matter." Jake shouted, his voice resonating with raw emotion, "We're here to fight for these jobs and each other, not just for ourselves." A wave of energy surged back through the crowd, reviving their spirits. It felt electric, like thunder waking up. Fists rose again, and he saw people turning towards one another, encouraging each other with nods of solidarity, but as Richard turned, his eyes narrowing at the growing crowd, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. If a man so ruthless could resort to threats, what other methods would he employ to divide them? "Together, we stand strong." Jake called one last time, but now he felt a weight pressing down harder than his own fears. What was Richard planning next? Just then, a device buzzed vigorously from Richard's pocket, slicing through the moment, and Jake's heart sank as he recognized that it was a walkie-talkie, a sign the guards were preparing for something far beyond mere words. Would their courage hold against Richard's underhanded tactics? And could they truly stand united when the storm hit full force? The day had arrived, and the air felt thick with urgency as Jake stood at the forefront of the crowd, facing his father. The energy of the workers surged around him, their hopeful chants ringing in his ears like a rallying cry against tyranny. But Richard's presence loomed like a dark cloud. He was unwavering, a stone statue of authority. "Jake!" Richard's voice sliced through the swirling atmosphere, unwavering and intimidating. "You think your little band of laborers can outsmart me? You're just a boy playing with fire." Jake could feel the tension tightening around him, a palpable fear that threatened to lull the crowd into silence. But he refused to back down. "No, Dad. I'm not playing anymore. This is real. We're all here because we refuse to be teared down." His voice rang out, fueled by the stories he gathered. The faces of those behind him lost hopes, dreams that were fighting for survival. The crowd behind him clenched their fists, echoing his resolve. They could feel his determination and they were ready to follow. Richard leaned in, practically using arrogance. "What can you possibly do? Your little friends don't scare me. I control the media, the money, everything. Once I pull the funding, they'll scatter like cockroaches in the light." The workers gasped softly, unease rippling through the crowd. Fear crept in again, like a cold fog rolling over them. Jake could see it in their eyes. They needed hope, and he was about to fight for it. "Together!" Jake shouted, voice carrying across the crowd. "We are not just workers, we're families. We are neighbors. We are the heartbeat of this city. And we will not be silenced." He locked eyes with each of his friends, his allies. They were steeled now, a wall of solidarity behind him. The crowd began to chant, voices rising like an anthem, drowning out Richard's threats. "We are strong. We are one." Richard's expression darkened, and Jake could sense he was losing control. But then, a miraculous thing happened. One by one, the workers began to march forward, holding hands together, forming a powerful chain of defiance. You could see it, the change was happening. Richard's bravado flickered, uncertainty creeping into his stoic facade. He had underestimated the bonds these people had forged. Just then, a loud horn blared from the street. It was a line of trucks filled with supporters from surrounding neighborhoods and other factories who had heard of their struggle. Signs decorated their vehicles, voices joining in the fray, chanting for dignity and respect. Jake felt the rush of adrenaline, filling him with hope that traveled like wildfire through his veins. With every cheer, every declaration of unity, he could almost taste victory. He stepped forward, his voice soaring once more. "Look around you. These people are here for you. They believe in you. Together, we can fight against injustice, against fear." Richard's composure wavered, and Jake caught the flicker of worry in his father's eyes. He seized the moment. "You built your empire on the backs of these workers. But empires built on fear crumble with time. Empires built on hope last forever." The crowd erupted, a united roar of support echoing against the factory walls. Uncertainty began to slip from Jake's shoulders as he watched Richard's bravado soften. In that fleeting instant, everything clicked. He was ready to be the change. No more hiding behind his father's legacy. Today, he was stepping into the light as a leader. Then it happened. Richard raised his hands, his voice barely cutting through the din of cheers. This is just the beginning. You'll regret losing your loyalty, Jake." He turned to leave, but finally, Jake stepped in, blocking his path. "I won't regret anything," Jake spoke softly, but there was a fierce intensity behind his gaze. "What you see is resilience. What you see is unity. This is our home. And I won't let you take it away from us." The crowd erupted once again, a wave of raw emotion that crashed into the factory like thunder, shaking the walls of Richard's empire to its very core. As Richard climbed back into his SUV, Jake felt an overwhelming sense of victory flutter through him. The battle may not have ended, but the war had shifted, and they were finally in control of their narrative. With a radiant smile, Jake spun around to face the crowd, voices now intertwining in a powerful chant against injustice, against despair. They were ready to take the next steps. They would no longer remain silent as fear infiltrated their community, arms lifted high in defiance, united as one force ready to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. This was just the beginning. He felt it in the atmosphere, an electric pulse of hope. "Together we rise," Jake shouted, adrenaline coursing through him as they reveled in their newfound strength. The transformation was not only for him but also for everyone around him, for a future that held no bounds. For the first time in his life, he understood the true weight of leadership, and he was ready to bear it, refusing to shy away from the impending storm. Jake felt alive again, not as Richard Hartman's son, but as Jake, a beacon of hope standing proudly among the people. The dawn of change was at hand, and he couldn't wait to embrace it. Now, don't wait another second. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories full of courage and transformation. If you love what you see, leave a like now to feed the algorithm with your support. Comment below with your reactions and feelings about this ending. Your voice matters. And remember, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. This is the moment to show your support.